Hello, I want to welcome you to the Meacham Conversations, and today we have Hollynd Karapetkova. So, did I get that right?
You did.
Right.
Fantastic. It's not an easy one.
So, what we've done usually is have you begin with a poem, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and then go from there.
Great. So I'm going to read a poem from my recent collection, Towline, and it's called Song of the Exiles. This poem I wrote thinking about the conversation surrounding immigration in our country, and I'm sorry to say it feels even more relevant now than it did several years ago when I wrote it. My husband is an immigrant, he's a political refugee, and I work with a lot of DACA students. And one student in particular I developed a really close relationship with, and his story really moved me. He is an indigenous person from Guatemala, and in his village, most of the young boys would be conscripted into gangs. And so when he was 13, he chose to leave rather than to take part in that kind of violence. And he made the trip here by himself at age 13. And I know he experienced horrible atrocities along the way, if you know anything about the journey that people make coming here. He never talked about it, but I wrote this poem really thinking about his journey and why he and other people like him come here. I also tied in some biblical imagery. For me, Adam and Eve are in a way the first exiles, and so I was thinking about that story as well. So I'll read the poem and then...
I hadn't thought about that as them being like the first exiles,
and I was raised in a really Christian household, so biblical imagery is always sort of in my cultural imagination, and it just seemed like a connection to me. Song of the Exiles. There never was a garden, only a leaving, miles and miles of footprints in the dirt. In the beginning, the shattered sun, the wind, and nothing left but our shadows sifting through the dust behind us. When we turned, we did not turn to salt. When we turned, there was nothing behind us to burn, nothing to return to. Though who could blame us for turning, with only the long days ahead, tongues tripping in the dirt. They said we didn't belong. They blamed us for leaving the garden, which never was or would be. Where could we go, we who had come from nowhere, and hence could not return?
I also noticed you mentioned referred to the Lot thing, the turning to salt.
I brought in.
I mean, that whole idea of not wanting to turn back, it can't turn back really at a certain point. Yeah, those journeys are just, we don't hear about them. You hear about them when they get towards the border. And you don't hear too much about what they left, except they'll say, gang violence or something like that. But the horrors that they go through, and just the idea of walking that distance too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at 13 alone.
Yeah, I mean, most Americans don't want to walk across the street.
That's right.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah. And I also know what my husband escaped. He's a political refugee. He came to America before the end of the Cold War, and so I know he had to leave. His life was in danger, and America offered him a place of refuge. And I want us to hold on to our sense of ourselves as the country that offers refuge to people in need.
Yeah, and not like close the borders.
Yeah.
So that's really affected the way your imagination works, I think.
It has. Yeah, the cultural experience. I've spent quite a bit of time in Bulgaria. I speak the language and I translate Bulgarian poetry and have a lot of family there. And spending a tremendous amount of time in another culture, in another place, has really impacted the way I understand my own culture. And it's also impacted the way I feel about space and location and where I belong. I often feel like an exile. I feel like I'm between two places. When I'm here, I miss Bulgaria. When I'm in Bulgaria, I miss America. And there are wonderful things about both cultures and horrible things about both cultures. And so you start to have this kind of divided personality when you live in two different places and you start to feel exiled from yourself in a way. You don't really fit either place. And it's an interesting experience.
Do you write a lot when you travel?
I usually write after the fact.
Me too, yeah.
Yeah, I'm usually so busy and so caught up in what's happening in the travel. Though I did live in Bulgaria for an extensive period of time, so that's different.
Yeah, one of my early mentors, William Meredith, spent a lot of time in Bulgaria.
Yes, he did. He's quite well known there.
Yeah,
every time I go,
he was such a great guy.
People want to talk about him. Yeah. He did wonderful things for the country and for literature in the country.
And I'm not sure how we got connected or anything, but
somebody has told me the story at one point and I just don't remember it. But
yeah, that's pretty amazing. So what other kinds of things have you been doing that that are related to your travel? Have you ever written a travel journal or anything like that?
No, I don't. I've dipped into prose a little bit here and there, but I find my heart keeps going back to poetry.
Yeah.
And so pretty much every experience that I have finds its way, that's remarkable and stays in my mind, finds its way eventually into a poem. But the translation work is really fantastic. I love translating poetry. It gives me a chance to step outside of my own head and my own perspective and my own sense of language. And it frees me up a little bit to think about language and linguistic possibility. Every language has its own limits and its own structures, and stepping into the structures of another language is really healthy for you in terms of envisioning possibilities in your own language.
So it affects your own work,
It absolutely does. Even at the syntactic level,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And your own teaching, too.
Yes.
That must affect your writing a lot.
Yes, absolutely. I love teaching. I've been doing it for most of my adult life. And I stumbled into it as a lot of academics do, I think. I really wanted to write poetry and be involved in, studying literature. And one of the ways that you do that is by teaching at the university level. And so as a graduate student, I was kind of thrown into the classroom. And I found out that I really loved it. And I'm at a school right now that is a teaching-centered university. And I have a really wonderful chance to interact closely with my students, to build relationships with them. And teaching is a wonderful way to grow as a writer as well, because everything that you learn and everything that you experience is going to find its way into your writing. And so I teach everything. I teach basic composition, I teach creative writing, I teach literature, and I find everything that I teach feeds my writing.
Yeah.
When I'm studying literature with students and I'm studying poetry in a literature classroom, it really gets me thinking about structure and form and some of the technical aspects of the work.
So often students will say something and you'll think, gee, I never thought of it that way before.
Oh, absolutely. It happens all the time.
I was just talking with someone and saying how they don't know what they're teaching us.
No, they don't. They don't. It's wonderful. I always tell them I learn way more from them than they do from me.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful that I'm able to be in a profession where I'm constantly challenged. I constantly get to learn and grow. And they keep me young, too. They keep me honest.
Yeah.
And they keep me fresh, which I really
they'll ask
appreciate.
questions that you just hadn't thought of before. And pretty amazing.
They do.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming today, and
thank you for having me.
You had a great reading the other night, and
Thank you.
That was wonderful.
This has been a wonderful experience.
Okay, thank you very much.